Welcome, everyone, to the Contact Center Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today we've got a really interesting conversation with Nate Brown. Now, Nate Brown is not only, like all of us, a student of CX, but really how the evolution that's happened in the CX industry, the advent of technology, how we can enable our agents and customer service representatives to do so much more. But then as leaders, how we can actually recognize what that is and the power and the impact that can have on the overall organization. We are not cost centers. We are value centers. And so the interesting take here that Nate has is we're going to be talking about the servant challenger mentality and what that means. And Nate, you've been around the industry for a long time. You're currently running contact centers in the music industry, some of the biggest names. Maybe tell us a little bit more about yourself and this servant challenger mentality to get started.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Steve. It's a huge pleasure to be here. A huge fan of the show. And thank you, Lauren Volpe, for the referral over here. Thrilled to be on. And yeah, my name is Nate, coming at you live from Nashville, Tennessee, Music City. Mandolin player, dad of two amazing daughters. We've got a super cool wife, pickleballer, disc golfer, and love experience design and helping businesses to take the meaningful purpose that they got started for and making it come to life, making it real, making it delivered better more often through great experience design. So that is the work that I do and so privileged to get to do for a major PRO organization and also through CX Accelerator, which is a nonprofit community that I run. So every day is a new adventure and I absolutely love this work, Steve.
Great. Let's kick us off. The experience designer, the servant challenger mentality is right at the heart of that. Give us the servant challenger mentality 101 before we start getting in and breaking it out into pieces.
Yeah, so me and Justin Robbins have been talking to all kinds of different CX leaders and contact center leaders and just find that we have this wonderful buzz, this excitement that's out there about how much the space is changing and how many organizations are viewing CX and contact center and customer service in this new strategic light. But then immediately we pivot into this technology conversation, which that is absolutely part of it. It's amazing what some of this stuff can do now around generative AI and what the implications around voice of customer and some of those areas and our ability to do proactive support and get really intimate from a data perspective with our customers. But there's so much more to the puzzle here, Steve, in terms of modernizing a customer service center. And it starts with this. It starts with the psychology of this work. And if we look at what CX is, it's the thoughts and perceptions that people have towards a brand. So let's start with where the thoughts and perceptions come from, that meet right in between our ears. Let's get on a psychological level here and let's think about how we as customer service leaders can help the people doing this work, those wonderful agents and customer service representatives, to get beyond a ticket taker mentality that's so last generation. We're in this new wonderful era where we get to do some really creative and wonderful service, but we got to adapt mentally.
Absolutely. So take us through the definition of a servant challenger and adopting that mentality.
So the mentality that I've been using most often and with the greatest success in terms of making that leap into this modern era is that of a servant challenger. So the word challenger just kept coming up for me, Steve. And I don't know if you noticed that theme too, but I'm looking at the Challenger Sale by Matt Dixon and the Challenger Customer and that ability to be a guide for them to use that story brand language. We're challenging our customers to be able to navigate the path even better, but it requires us to be able to jump alongside them and to push them in really good, healthy ways. Internally, we have radical candor, care personally, so we can challenge directly. We've got the amazing 4 levels of psychological safety by Timothy R. Clark, the circle of psychological safety there, the level 4 being that of a challenger. So this just kept coming up again and again for me, Steve, is like, there's something here with this repetition theme. It's like, what does it look like for us to break the status quo, which we looked at pride in performing is the most deadly thing inside of an organization in terms of our inability to make that leap and to innovate into this great era of customer experience that we're in. That's what holds us back, is that state of inertia and status quo. So in order to break that, we've got to challenge it. But we've got to give people essentially permission. We got to give people an example of what that challenger really looks like. But then we layer on some more things. And I think we're going to get to that, Steve, but it's not enough just to challenge just to punch upward and break glass. We want to ultimately serve something bigger than ourselves in the pursuit of that. And that's where we see the idea of collective genius really take shape and start to help an organization to innovate from a customer experience design perspective.
So I'm dying to ask you one particular question here, because one thing to talk about innovation, challenge, design, new technologies, at the core of all of this is the relationship between the company and its customers. And right in the center of that is the agent. So I'm going to ask a question just to begin with here. What is your point of view on the importance of the agent, especially in this new technology, like I said, generative AI world, where on one hand you could say, wow, that's going to do away with agents. Is that a mentality that you share? Why or why not? But also to take on everything that you've talked about and re-engineer the customer experience, you have to be talking about a higher quality agent, higher quality training that's going into that to understand, adopt, and actually deliver on what you're talking about here. So I just love to have your thoughts on all that.
I love thinking about the classic wisdom, Steve, from the effortless experience when it talks about guiding customers to the best resolution path. And there's so many resolution paths that are possible, especially right now with what we have available from a technology standpoint. But they're not all paths are going to lead there. Not all paths are going to lead to these elevated self-service capabilities. Many of them will and should. But is that the best resolution, the one that's going to offer the best experience? For so many of these paths, what we're going to find, Steve, is that people, they want to get a sense of identity from the brand. They want to experience community with the brand. They want to have a creative, interesting conversation with somebody. Maybe they're a little lonely. Maybe they're a little lost. Maybe they don't know the questions to ask. And when you've got somebody on the line who represents that brand, defends the promise of that brand, can give you that confidence and that spark in terms of, wow, what a cool thing. What a cool thing this is that I get to be in relationship with this brand. That's what an amazing customer service worker does.
And I can imagine too, that's what they all want to do. They don't want to be held to a 3-minute max call time. They don't want to be held to these constraints and here's the script and everything. They want to help and they want to feel not only helping that relationship here, but they're helping convey the opportunity, what they're hearing and what change happens from it. That elevates, because we've got a major problem in the industry with agent turnover. And part of it is just feeling like you're a cog, you're replaceable, you're entry level. Everything that you've been saying so far is in the exact polar opposite direction in terms of their importance, their role, their impact on the business. If you know that, and you feel like you have that kind of importance inside of an organization as an agent, that opens up much more opportunity, growth, career projection, job satisfaction. It helps change this whole dynamic around.
That's so true, Steve. I love the way that you say it. Let's automate well. Let's leverage technology well in the areas that we can. And then let's do an amazing job where we get to cultivate community. And I think more and more, as we look at what CX is and what it does, that's what it is. We're earning loyalty through that idea of identity and community, because we're in right now an epidemic of loneliness, according to our U.S. Surgeon General. And in there, right in that report, one of the main resolutions the U.S. Surgeon General offers up is to cultivate meaningful communities. But what better place to do that than in relationship with these brands that we would care so much about? If they gave us an opportunity to really have community with that brand, if we could get a sense of identity from that in a more elevated way, but then we're put into these little boxes, both as a customer in terms of the way we get to relate, and as an agent, as a customer service worker, we're put in the ticket taker box. And like you said, that cog, do this thing, say it right, get it perfect, go to the next call. I want to make sure you got 60 of those a day. I don't really care about the nature of the interaction. All I want to make sure is that these metrics are hit. CSAT's high enough. That's fine. Now let's make this an efficiency shop. Whoa. Let's focus on efficiency over here where that belongs and do an amazing job with the self-service capabilities. But in the areas where we get to cultivate community, let's let people be people and let's make them even better at doing that. And we're not doing that, Steve, enough.
It's so funny because everybody talks about we are a people business, yet we're boxing our people into areas where they can't relate, are driven by numbers, and they are driven by time. And so their goal is to resolve as quick as they can, not build community, not build relationships, not build the loyalty and that connection that you're talking about. So, how do we get started? What do we need to do? I'm a CX leader. I'm on the podcast now. Where do I start? What do I do?
So as a CX leader, you get to be an evangelist for the brand promise in the organization. So it's focusing in on why the business got started in the first place. And I love that HBR, company identity matrix, which guides an organization through those steps of thinking and locks you into what sums up what we are going to stand for. We're going to put a line in the sand right here. This is who we are. This is our brand personality. This is how we express it. This is who we bring in. This is the characteristics of who we are. Here's our competencies. We're better at this than anybody else in the world. And here's the experience that we're creating. And we're going to defend that together, create some pride around that. Otherwise, why would the customer service center be more than a cost center? If people aren't convicted and excited about the concept of defending the brand promise, but then also the math is there in terms of when you do a great job with the customers you have, that's how you earn new ones. Look at the rise of customer success, the idea of maximizing customer value. Sales and marketing traditionally is being replaced in many industries in many ways by that concept of customer success. Let's knock it out of the park when it comes to customer engagement, because that fuels the acquisition engine more and better than anything else. So it's helping the organization to embrace that larger CX mentality, then bringing it back into the contact center, back into customer service, and freeing people up to go beyond that idea of average handle time and that over focus on efficiency metrics to where you get to put that in the right place. There's a place for that in the customer service conversation. Let's save money. Let's save time in the right areas. But then we get to go deep and foster the right skills with these incredibly talented people. We get to let them be the voice of the customer. We get to let them be proactive in terms of making that metaphor of being a great guide come to life for the customer. And all these wonderful things that a customer service representative has the ability to do if only we make the time and foster the skill.
So here's what I'm taking away from what you're just saying. You have to be a change agent within your company, because what you're describing is not the state of business in CX today. So the first thing that you would have to do is change the internal mentality and how you look at the contact center and the value of the contact center, what the contact center can actually do, everything from marketing to sales to product development to customer success. And is that a starting point? Is establishing, here's what we can do for you? How do we get started? What's the important first step in changing that internal mentality?
My favorite change management methodology is the classic John Coder leading change. And if you look at the first 3 stages of that, number 1 is to establish a sense of urgency. You got to light a fire, or else nobody's going to change anything. Like, our brains are super wired with these giant highways of neurons. And if you want to break that pattern, that's why inertia is so deadly, is we're wired for it to fall into that rut, into a comfortable place. So we got to break some pavement here, folks. So if you want change to stick, if you want change to happen, it starts with lighting a match, getting that sense of urgency going. We can't keep operating this way. The more intrinsic conversation is, we're not meeting our brand promise. We're not standing up for the things that we should stand up for. We're not doing the thing we said we would do when we started this organization. Then on the other side of it, others are. We're losing our market share because these competitors are doing the customer experience conversation for real. They're getting the customer experience thing right. It's hard to do, but that's where the acquisition engine comes from. That's how you gain market shares, doing a great job with your existing customers and earning new ones through that clarity of focus that you get when you have that brand promise crystallized. So there's a lot that has to be done in that stage of creating a sense of urgency. But then the next stage, number 2 in that model, is to do a change coalition. You're bringing people together, so that way it's not you as a CX leader or customer service leader cracking a whip. That's not the way to challenge. That's not how we're going to gain influence here. You got to invite people into the work. They got to want it for themselves. You got to light a match inside of them, the type of match that they want to go light for somebody else. Otherwise, It's not going to take root. You're not going to gain the plant that has fruit on this CX vine here unless you have that CX change coalition established with good functional leaders that represent that overall customer journey, that life cycle of the customer. And then number 3 is remove barriers. And that's where we start sucking the friction out, Steve, and allowing people and the tools and the technology to do what it can do and free things up to be amazing.
So here's a story that I think is really relevant. Everything you just talked about there. CX, if you want to literally create urgency, in most markets, in most industries, competitive advantage is very hard to come by. Can't do it with product, technology, and think you're going to take any kind of lead that you might have had, a product feature or something, and that's going to be our competitive advantage that's here to stay. So more and more, a competitive advantage is the service that you expect and get from a company. I just recently changed where I get my domains and I do my hosting and stuff like that. And I was like, I'm only going to go with a company that was price competitive, but I can actually call and talk to a live person. I can get live help. I'm not a techie. If I have something wrong, I need it taken care of. And somebody who's actually going to help me do the work, walk me through the process just to get to where I need to go. That became the competitive advantage in a hosting company for me. So when you're talking about that kind of, what's that very first step in creating that sense of urgency, it should be in creating one of the largest competitive advantages that this company can have in delivering on those brand promises and the things that you were talking about up front and serving our community, serving our customer base. I love everything you're talking about here.
I've got a little narrative real quick for you, Steve. It's the idea of that CX change coalition. It's so critical. If you're going to really get something going here in terms of some CX momentum and start to awaken this larger CX mentality across the organization, you just got to do it. And Gene Bliss has this wonderful section in Chief Customer Officer 2.0 talking about identifying the power core. Every organization has some kind of power core. And I remember reading that and in the organization I was serving in at the time, thinking about who's the power core here. And sure enough, it was IT, which I think these days is even more the case because they control the data. They've got the budget. They've got the strategic initiatives in their department of IT. And so often they're the power core. And so often they're the ones that are most mystified by this customer experience stuff. And it's most important for us to evangelize there and educate there, be kind there and invite them in to the work. And I remember doing that inside of this one organization I was serving in, and that IT leader came alive and was just so hungry for it. And I think most IT people are. We put them in a box, like they just don't get it, and they're the main barrier we're going to have. We're never going to really have them be a catalyst for change with us. Don't allow that, because that's just going to be such a barrier for you. Find a way to make the CX opportunity stand out for them as the way to solve their challenges, because at the end of the day, it will be.
I love where you're going here, and I want to make sure that we get some core of your recommendations. And you actually talk about this challenger mentality, and you talk about it from the perspective of a confident challenger. You talk about the perspective of a caring challenger, and then a servant challenger. Take us into your thinking there and the differences in how it gets applied.
So, at least to me, it started with the sales, the challenger sale, and in some ways almost being like somebody that's just so capable of going against the grain and pushing upstream and just making things happen and breaking inertia. But then radical candor really convicted me around, no, but it's more than just that. It's also our ability to really care about the people around us so that we earn the right to challenge instead of just pushing on everybody. It's like, no, we got to earn the right to do that first. And there's things we need to do. There's ways to be a caring challenger, a relevant challenger. But then as I look at the principles of servant leadership, that's the culminating factor to me, especially as we apply this into a customer service realm. It's that idea of just helping to elevate the voices of others, choosing ethics before profits, finding truth, even when it's hard, like going deep when it's inconvenient, seeking that out and making sure that the truth is found in these situations and that we're not perpetuating bias or lazy inconvenience on behalf of me as a leader, like No, we're going to elevate those who are doing the best things and that have earned it and are living out the principles of the brand. You're living out those core values and the mission of the brand and really elevating those individuals. You're serving the brand, like you're serving the brand promise by making it real. You're serving each other. And think about how much more important that becomes than just the idea of challenging for me to hit a sales target or for me to get to the next step in my career. If you've got an organization full of very selfish challengers, you're not going anywhere. Like together, you're just not going anywhere. And I love the work, and forgive me, I've forgotten the names of the authors, but I've just been so enamored with the idea of collective genius, an incredible resource that's out there. And I think with servant challengers, when we awaken that mentality, collective genius is what comes into play there. And that's where you have an organization so mature that when a new idea comes up, it's not going to be the idea, like perfect, like one person submitting one idea is going to be the entire solution. That's not the way things work in complicated organizations. It's going to be the piece of the puzzle. But then you got to have people that are willing to bring their piece of the puzzle and bring it together and actually work together to find the larger solution and to make the brand promise come to life and to serve customers better. But it's so hard to get people out of their own zone to do that. You have to have that circle of psychological safety locked in and in place. You've got to have challengers that you've identified in that who are willing to push against the grain in good, healthy, positive ways. So when we bring that idea of challenger together with that idea of being a servant leader, the sky is the limit, Steve.
Do you have a story that you can tell how you've implemented this, how it impacted, like bring this tremendous amount of insight into here's how it works? Because you're involved day to day, you're running contact centers. Give us a story that we can think through this in terms of how it plays out.
This is my story. I mean, this is my testimony, Steve. As a leader, these are the things that have stuck, that have worked, that have helped me to cultivate good teams, high-performing teams. So it starts with me living these things out. I've just been watching leaders through my entire career, Steve. I'll give you this example. The first 10 seconds of the day say so much about a leader's mentality and how they're going to be able to accomplish anything on behalf of their team. And I think about the first 10 seconds of the day, when you come into the office and you either metaphorically just shut the door and just go straight into your own world, or you're there and immediately like, hey, how's it going today? How can I help you? How can I help you to get going? Is there anything that's in your way right now? How can I remove a barrier for you? I would see those leaders who are just excited to come in and just serotonin coming out of them, that community chemical of serotonin, and just creating that goodwill that would spill over into these customer service workers or any type of worker and give them the fountain water on which to spill over and serve one another really well and serve the customer really well, versus the cortisol of the leader that shuts the door. I've just seen so many different leaders who have done one or the other. And it's amazing looking at the track record and the results of those teams. I feel like I could predict the success of a team based on how the leader walks into the office and spends the first 10 seconds of their day with some degree of accuracy there. But one more small story there, Steve. This applies very much not just on the leadership level, but on the agent level. I remember getting to work as a consultant for a great retailer in the Midwest selling like PE equipment. And there was this one uniquely talented young woman who was just knocking her job out of the park as a customer service worker. And so, of course, I'm looking for what are the attributes here? What's going on? And I remember asking this person, how are you doing this? What makes you tick? And she was like, well, when I was looking for a job at X time during COVID, I couldn't get into the medical field. And there's reasons for that. But I really wanted to find a way to serve children. And I found this amazing job where I got to help these PE teachers to knock their PE classes out of the park and have healthier, happier kids. And I really came to life in this job. Like, oh my gosh, like that's it. That's the intrinsic motivator that allows you and opens up the way for you to be the servant challenger that you are. It starts with that intrinsic motivation that's rooted in the actual functional brand promise of the organization you're serving inside of. It's pretty exciting when we find those people who are just doing it for the right reasons.
Absolutely. We need more of those people. So we've talked about a lot And if there was one takeaway that you wanted people to have from this podcast, what would that be?
Establish curiosity. Curiosity, I think, is one of our most underutilized superpowers as CX leaders. Make people think about how we could do something different and better for our customers. Why does that matter so much? And give that gift of curiosity. If customer experience work isn't making you excited at the possibilities, then something's wrong there. We should be giving that gift of serotonin every day as a customer service leader, because we are on the front lines of defending the brand promise in a way that nobody else gets to do. So it's a gift to us. It's a gift to the organization. Let's not fall into those victim patterns and fall into a little box that we so often do, because inertia's a knocking, status quo's a knocking. We got to be pavement breakers, and we got to keep giving that gift of serotonin outward to awaken the curiosity in the organization about what it could look like if we did an even better job for our customers. So take that with you today.
Okay, I love it. If folks had other questions that they wanted to ask you, would it be appropriate if we gave out maybe a link to your profile on LinkedIn?
Love that. Hop on over to cxaccelerator.com. All those roads will lead to our wonderful community there with a bunch of supportive CX professionals that are doing the same thing we are, just trying to figure this out together. And I'm right in there waiting for you. Would love to be a resource for you. So let's connect there, and certainly on LinkedIn and on X as well.
All right. Nate, thank you so much for coming and sharing just the enthusiasm. It's going to get off the inertia box. Thank you very much for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everybody.